Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at a Magicka Templar DD build for the Flames of Oblivion patch. Let's get right into it. Pop a potion, buff up. As you can see, we're with 64 points into Magicka, sitting on about 33k Magicka, 23k health, 14k stamina. Magicka recovery is really good with 1700. Our spell damage is almost 5k like this, but it will go even higher when all our glyphs proc and our sets work. Spell critical is only 34%, but that does absolutely not matter for this build because we've got other means to get the crit damage going. And then with the rune down, our resistances are really good at 25k spell resistance and 17k physical resistance as well. We're using the Shadow Mundustone here, not the Thief. And for food, I'm using Clockwork Citrus Fillet. This is quite expensive. It gives you max health, health recovery, max Magicka and Magicka recovery for 2 hours or 2.5 hours if you've got the CP in the green tree. If you don't want to spend too much money on that, or you don't have the perfect row, I think it is, to craft it, you might want to go with Witch Mother's Potent Brew, which also gives you health, Magicka, and Magicka recovery. A little less than this one, so for endgame stuff, this is definitely the way to go, but for everything else, you can just use the Witch Mother's Potent Brew as well. For potions, I'm using the Alliance Spell Draught, which gives me Magicka recovery, major sorcery, and major prophecy, increasing our spell damage and spell critical. You don't really have to craft these anymore. You can just buy them at the Alliance vendor. They're now called Alliance Spell Draught and give you the exact same values than the Essence of Spell Power used to do. Or if you have enough of these, the Gold Coast Spellcaster Elixirs, which sometimes drop from the daily rewards or crown crates, these give you the exact same stuff as well, so you might as well use these then if you have them. Alright, we'll be looking at these skills. First off though, Khajiit is definitely the best race for this build, this particular build. It does more damage than High Elf and Dark Elf because of the increase to critical damage by 12%. So this really works very well with this exact build here. You can still be a High Elf and a Dark Elf. It'll be a little bit less damage. Because that crit damage bonus is just really nice on this particular build. Also, for being a Khajiit, you get max health, Magicka, and stamina, just all around nice stats, and then health recovery and stamina and Magicka recovery. So, Khajiit are probably the top DPS race in this patch. If you are a High Elf and a Dark Elf and you don't want to race change, you can still use this build though. It won't be just as strong as on a Khajiit, but it will still be very strong also, so not necessarily a reason to race change because it is quite expensive, but if you have a token, this works very well with a Khajiit. Okay, first up is our spammable Puncturing Sweeps. That's the first thing you unlock in the Adric Spear skill line. This just deals magic damage to the closest enemy and also magic damage to all other enemies. Plus you heal for 40% of the damage done with this ability. So this is very nice, not only in single target situations, but also in AoE situations. As you can see, if I'm targeting the first guy here, and I'm using the sweeps, he will take the most damage, but everybody else will take damage as well. So this is very nice in area of effect. The whole build generally has a lot of area of effect skills, as you'll see, so it's very strong in AoE and single target. The next thing is Radiant Oppression. This comes from Dawn's Wrath. So last thing you unlock starts as Radiant Destruction, and what this does is this is pretty much your execute. It's a sort of beam of fire that deals magic damage, but it deals up to 480% more damage to enemies below 50% health. Also deals up to 20% more damage in proportion to your current Magicka. So this is one of the strongest executes in the whole game. Just looks like this. And if the enemy is under 50% health, it will do up to 480% more damage. So you might want to start using this at around the 30% mark, I'd say, instead of your normal spammable, the Puncturing Sweeps. Next up is Inner Light. This is from the Major skill line. This is really only there for passives. We don't actively use that skill, But while it is slotted, our max Magicka is increased by 5%, plus we also gain Major Prophecy. We get that anyway from our potions, but the extra max Magicka is very nice. Plus there's a couple other nice passives in the Major skill line, which we'll get into later. The next thing we've got on the front bar is the Blazing Spear. That is sort of an AoE with an 8-meter radius that lasts for 10 seconds. You just throw a spear that deals magic damage and then continues to deal magic damage over 10 seconds. Also, your allies can activate the Blessed Charge synergy, restoring about 4k Magicka or stamina, whichever is higher. Looks like this. Also in AoE, as you can see, everybody inside of it is taking damage. And then the last thing we've got in the front bar is the Barbed Trap from the Fighters Guild, because we do want to get the Minor Force, increasing our critical damage by another 10% for the duration of the trap. It deals physical damage, just looks like this. You put a trap on the ground, and the enemy that's get caught inside of it will take damage. Not that much, but as I said, it is mostly for the Minor Force, because we definitely want that Minor Force buff, increasing our critical damage even further. So we will get crit damage increase for being a Khajiit, for having Minor Force, for being a Templar. There's also something in the passives of the Adric Spear skill line. So our crit damage will go through the roof, added with our champion points. It's gonna be really nice. Shooting Star will be the ultimate in the front bar. This is also from the Mages Guild, and this is really also only there for Mages Guild passives. You can use this if you want to. You generate 12 ultimate for each enemy hit by it. It just calls a comet down from the sky that deals flame damage in the area, and then deals additional flame damage for 13 seconds over time in that area. But generally we just use the back bar ultimate. This one you can use if there are a lot of enemies and you know that you will get a lot of ultimate back. So say if you're in the beginning of Hel Ra and there's a lot of Eds, you can just call the Shooting Star comet down, and it'll probably just refill your ultimate almost all the way back up. So it's nice in situations with loads of ads, but for single target damage we'll just use the or not for single target damage, for boss fights we'll just use the back bar ultimate because it is stronger. Alright, moving on to the back bar. First thing we've got here is Solar Barrage. This comes from the Dawn's Wrath skill line. Second thing you unlock starts out as Solar Flare. You can morph this to Solar Barrage, and what this does is you conjure a solar energy to blast enemies around you, dealing magic damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Plus, while this is active, you gain Empower, increasing the damage of your light and heavy attacks by 40%. So this is not only a really nice AoE that's surrounding ourselves, but if we activate it, we also gain Empower, which will increase the damage of all of our light and heavy attacks, which is why this is a really good skill to have on the bar as well. Okay, the next thing we've got is our shield from the light armor skill line, Harness Magicka. This is just a damage shield that absorbs up to about 10k-ish for 6 seconds, and when it's active you also restore Magicka while the shield, while you're getting hit by the enemy, pretty much. So the shield absorbs the damage and you restore Magicka. Just looks like this. It's really just a damage shield, lasts for 6 seconds. If you are in a trial situation where you know you don't need a damage shield and you trust your healers, you could put something else there like Degeneration, so damage over time ability from the Mages Guild skill line, or just double bar Inner Light to have the max Magicka on both bars. That's all optional, but for most content I would advise people to run a damage shield, especially in dungeons or arenas or trials with groups that aren't really well set up and haven't played together much. So just so you have that oh shit button that will stop you from dying eventually. The next thing we've got is Channeled Focus. This will help us with sustain but also with resistances. Starts out as Rune Focus from the Restoring Light skill line. You create a rune of celestial protection while it's active and you're in the rune. You get Major Resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by almost 6k, and you also recover 240 Magicka every 1 second, And yeah, standing within the rune increases the physical resistance and spell resistance granted by 50%. So this is how we get our resistances up. Looks like this. It's just a rune that we stand inside. And while we're attacking the boss and inside the rune, we have higher resistances. Plus we also restore Magicka, which helps us with our sustain. Next thing we've got on the back bar is from the Undaunted skill line. It's called Mystic Orb. This is one of the strongest AoE damage skills in the game at the moment. It's an orb that floats over the ground and deals magic damage every half second. Plus enemies can also activate the combustion synergy to deal even more magic damage, and the allies, obviously allies can use the synergy, not enemies. Allies will restore up to around 4k Magicka or stamina, whichever is higher for them. So this is really, really nice for group sustain. It looks like this. You just send this orb flying over the ground, and everything it passes by will take magic damage every half second. Plus, it's really nice for sustain in dungeon and trial groups, because allies can activate the synergy and then get almost 4k Magicka or stamina back, whichever their preferred or higher resource is. And then from the destruction stuff skill line, obviously we've got Unstable Wall of Elements. This is there to deal magic damage in area of effect. It'll deal flame damage because we are using a flame stuff on the back bar, and it will have the chance to put the burning status effect on enemies, and then burning enemies take 20% more damage from the ability. Plus, when the effect ends, the wall will explode and deal an extra bit of damage. So there you go, everything inside of the wall of fire is just continuously taking damage, and then at the end the wall explodes, dealing even more damage. For the backbar ultimate, we're using Elemental Rage. This comes from the Destruction Staff skill line. This is just a big, pretty strong AoE ultimate that will deal flame damage. It's gonna be called Fiery Rage then, since we're using a flame staff. That will deal 8000 flame damage every 1 second for over 6 seconds. And it's just pretty strong, generally, to burn ad pools or to deal with higher or like stronger ads that have more health. If the tank manages to stack everything on the boss, or even if there's a mini boss next to the boss, if the tank manages to stack them and you drop the Fiery Rage, it's going to be a big damage boost to the boss and the ad or mini boss, whatever you have there. It's just one of the stronger ultimates in the game. It's also really good for arenas when you're fighting a lot of ads and you can somehow manage to group them up and put that on them. Most likely they'll all be dead once it ends. So yeah, very nice ultimate as well. Okay, we'll have a quick look at the passives. Adric Spear increases your critical damage done by 10% while you have an Adric Spear ability slotted. Also increases the damage done to blocking targets by 10%. That's not too important for us, but the critical damage is very important to us, because as I said before, we'll have minor force from the Beast Trap, we'll have an extra 12% crit damage for being a Khajiit, we'll have an extra 10% crit damage for being a Templar, and then we'll also have even more extra crit damage from our champion points, which we'll get into later. So all our critical damage done will go through the roof. It's going to be really high. Next up, when activating an Adric Spear ability, you gain minor protection for 6 seconds, reducing your damage taken. That's just generally nice because it makes us a bit more survivable and bulky. Burning Light, when you deal damage with an Adric Spear ability 4 times in rapid succession, you deal an extra 5k almost magic damage to the target, which is higher. It's also very good for us. And then it increases your weapon damage and spell resistance. So the weapon damage ain't too important for us. The only thing that does weapon damage is the Beast Trap, but we get a nice little buff to the Beast Trap, and we also get an extra spell resistance buff. Very nice to have as well. This will increase the duration of your Sunfire, Eclipse, and Solar Flare. This is important for us because we do use the morph of Solar Flare, the Solar Barrage, so this will last 2 seconds longer than it usually would. Casting a Dawn's Wrath ability in combat generates 3 ultimate. So that means just for using the abilities that we have anyway, may it be Solar Barrage or Radiant Oppression, we do gain ultimate all the time. Also Illuminate, casting a Dawn's Wrath ability grants minor sorcery to you and your group for 20 seconds, increasing their spell damage by 10%. That's also very nice. And then Restoring Spirit reduces the health, magicka, and stamina and ultimate costs of your abilities by 5%. You definitely want this as well. We'll have a quick look in the Restoring Light skill line. Increases the healing effect from your Restoring Light abilities by 12%. This is not too important for us since we're not really using anything from here except for the channeled focus. However, if you are doing solo content or arenas or dungeons with groups that aren't too good or too well set up, you might want to slot something like Breath of Life just for an extra heal button in case something goes wrong. Nice passive to have anyway. While you are standing inside your rune focus, which we do, area effects, and for up to 4 seconds after leaving them, you gain minor mending, increasing your healing done by 8%. This is not bad. Also increases the amount of damage you can block by 10% for the duration. It's not totally necessary, but it's nice to have because we do use the rune focus anyway, the channeled focus here, the morph. When you heal an ally under 50% with the Restoring Light ability, you grant them 2 ultimate. It's not too important for us because we are not a healer and we don't really heal other people unless we would use something like Breath of Life in dungeons. And then Master Ritualist increases resurrection speed by 20%. This is very nice for combat and trials. Resurrected allies return with 100% more health, and it gives you a 50% chance to fill an empty soul gem, which isn't too important. But the resurrection speed in trials and dungeons definitely isn't a big advantage, so you definitely want that as well. Okay, weapons. We are using dual wield on the front bar. That's become sort of viable for Magicka DPS, and since the Templar is sort of a melee ranged class anyway with the jabs, because you have to be in melee range, the dual wield just comes in very nicely with this. I wouldn't necessarily use it on most other Magicka DPS classes, especially if you're running trials where you want to be able to kill things from range. But since the Templar is more of a close combat class, even on Magicka anyway, the dual wield works pretty nicely here. Now let's quickly look at the passives. While dual wielding, increases damage with dual wield abilities by 20%. And that's not too important for us because we're not actually using any dual wield abilities. We're just using the daggers, but we don't actually use any abilities from this tree here. So I'm not completely sure if this counts for the light attacks as well with the dual wield, but I don't think so. You can probably leave that out. Also increases the weapon damage by 6% of the offhand's weapon damage. This should count though for the light attacks, I suppose. Reduces the stamina cost of dual wield abilities. You don't really need that as well. Gives you a 15% bonus to when you're attacking stunned, immobilized, disoriented, or silenced enemies using dual wield attacks. So this should count for the light attacks, but yeah, where it's at is really the last one here. While dual wielding, which we are doing, each sword increases the weapon and spell damage by 142. So we got 2 swords on the front bar, and that gives us an extra 300 spell damage as well, not just weapon damage. So this is very nice for us. This is a pretty cool boost. Now usually you would run daggers, which would increase your crit chance rating by 812, but we don't need the crit chance. Why? We'll get into that later when we're looking at the sets. So for this build with the set that we're running, I would definitely go for swords. I guess you could go for axes for even more crit damage, but the 4%, I think the swords weapon and spell damage outweigh the bit of crit damage that axes would do here. So yeah, I've just opted to go with swords. You could go with axes, but I think it's not going to be as strong as the swords here. And for any other sort of dual wielding class, if you're not using the set we're running, the daggers will probably be the way to go. Destruction stuff, obviously you want all of the passives in that because that's our main weapon on the back bar for this build. Light armor, you obviously want all of the passives in here. They're all really good. We do want the Magicka recovery and the reduced Magicka cost, the increased spell resistance, the increased spell critical, the spell penetration. It's It's all really good for us. I'm running 7 pieces of light armor here, so technically you don't need anything into these unless you still want to run a medium monster shoulder and a heavy monster head like people used to do in the old patches. If you're doing that, then just grab the passives from the heavy armor and at least the Windwalker and Athletics one from the medium armor skill line as well. However, we got such big pools, and the more champion points you get, the better your damage mitigation will get as well. So 7 light is definitely the most damage you could do. Fighters Guild, what we definitely want is Intimidating Presence, because it will make the cost of Barbed Trap, it will reduce it by 15%. And then maybe also you generate 3 ultimate whenever you kill an enemy with a Fighters Guild ability slotted, because most of the time we will kill them on the front bar, and that's where the Barbed Trap is. So that will help our ultimate gain as well. Plus your Fighters Guild abilities deal an additional 20% damage to Undead, Dead, or Werewolf. That will only be the Beast Trap, and that will increase the damage of our Beast Trap for a tiny little bit. So these are nice. Banish the Wicked and Intimidating Presence are definitely the ones to go for first though. Mages Guild, you want all of these. This will reduce the Magicka cost of your Mages Guild abilities by 15%, so of our Shooting Star. This will increase the duration by 20%. This will increase your max Magicka and Magicka recovery for every Mages Guild ability slotted, so that's 4% on our front bar. And then casting a Mages Guild ability grants you Empower, increasing the damage of your light and heavy attacks. That's not so important because we already get Empower from having Solar Barrage up, but yeah, you can get them anyway if you wanted to. Now, Psijic Order, you don't actually need anything from here, but there might be trials where you can't be the close ranged, and then you'd have to swap from daggers to a staff on your front bar. Things where you have to fight at range, or in places like Asylum Sanctorium, for example. I think Elemental Weapon or Force Pulse would be the best spam to replace our jabs, our puncturing sweeps. And then for the Barbed Trap, since you can't be close ranged, you'd have to go with Channeled Acceleration to get the minor force from this. So it is a nice skill line to have on a Templar, even if you are playing a close range build. Sometimes you just can't, and then you'll have these 2 skills to swap out for. And then obviously you want all of the passives as well when you're using them. Undaunted, you still want the passives from here, even though we're wearing 7 pieces light on this build. It will still give us 2% more max health, stamina, and magicka, and it will also give us more resources back when taking a synergy, so these are quite important. Get them anyway. Khajiit, you have, no matter what race you are, you always want all of your racial passives. That's why, well, that's just how it goes. And then medicinal use in the alchemy to make your potions last 30% longer, so you can have 100% uptime on them. Okay, so much for all of these skills and the passives. Now let's see how this build works. On the front bar, we are running 2 swords of mechanical acuity, one in Nirnhoned with a poison glyph, and one in infused with a flame damage glyph. There is no reason to run precise here really, because what mechanical acuity does is it gives you stamina, magicka, it adds weapon and spell damage, and when you deal direct damage you gain unerring mechanical vision for 5 seconds, granting you 100% critical strike chance. So you will definitely crit as soon as you get the vision, and that will only proc on our front bar, which is where we do the most damage. So this is the reason why the really low crit chance doesn't matter, because as soon as the set procs, we will have 100% crit chance anyway. And then, as I said before, once it procs and we do have the 100% crit chance, our crit damage will be super high for being a Khajiit, for being a Templar, for having the minor force buff on. This is how the build works. So you've got the sword in Nirnhoned with a poison glyph, the other one in infused with a flame damage glyph. Precise would give us even more crit chance, but we don't really need that. It's also why I said we are playing swords, just to recap on that, because daggers would give us crit chance, but if we already have 100% crit chance, and we will crit 100% for certain, we don't need more crit chance at all. So we're going with the increased spell damage from each of the swords. On the back bar still the Maelstrom's Inferno stuff. What this one does is the Wall of Elements, our light and heavy attacks to enemies inside of it will deal more damage. So as long as the wall is down, all of the light attacks we're doing in between the skills or the heavies will deal more damage. Obviously, you don't really need the perfected one here because the penetration bonus isn't really important. In most groups, you will reach pen cap easily these days on a Magicka DPS. So the normal one in infused with a weapon and spell damage glyph to give us an extra 452 spell damage every time the glyph procs, boosting our spell damage over 5k, will be very nice as well. And then obviously to finish the set off you want Mechanical Acuity jewelry, all in Bloodthirsty with spell damage glyphs on them. Now Mechanical Acuity is craftable. Maybe someone in your guild has it at their house. If not, it's in Clockwork City, about here, right below this way shrine. So if you enter Clockwork City for the first time, you will end up here at this way shrine. This is where it goes into the Brass Fortress. And then if you ride back here, around here is the crafting station for Mechanical Acuity. For a monster set, we're using Zans. This comes from Scalecaller. I know the spell crit bonus is technically sort of wasted because we get the 100% anyway, but it still is probably the strongest DPS set at the moment because of that Beam of Fire, which will disappear if you move more than 8 meters away from the target. But since we are close ranged anyway using daggers and puncturing sweeps, you should be close enough to the target at all times anyway. So this will be the strongest monster set option. With its beam of flame damage that deals damage every 1 second for 6 seconds. However, it does not work in Sunspire. I've said this in a couple other videos as well. For some reason the dragons it just won't work on. And then another option you could use if you are in Sunspire would be Dummy House from Falkreath Hold, which would just give you even more Magicka stamina and create a ring underneath you that will grant you another 289 spell damage. So just another flat spell damage bonus. Now on the body we're wearing Ceroria. This will give you spell damage, maximum Magicka, Minor Slayer to increase all of your damage done to Dungeon Trial and Arena monsters, and when you're dealing direct damage with single target attacks it creates a ring of fire beneath you for 10 seconds. Standing inside of the ring grants you a stack of Ceroria's boon, and each stack will give you 52 spell damage, 10 stacks max, so that means 520 spell damage. So if you got 10 stacks of Ceroria and the glyph proc from our Maelstrom stuff, we can almost reach 6k spell damage, which is pretty good. And yeah, if you'd use Dummy House you'd probably be able to go over the 6k, but Zans is nice as well. So Ceroria works like this. You attack, you create that ring of fire. That's the Zan beam, by the way, the flame beam here. And as long as you keep on attacking, you will get these stacks of Ceroria. That's the symbol to the very right above my bar here, the little orange one that says 10, and then it keeps ticking down. Like not now because I'm still doing damage over time. But if I step outside of the ring, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then my 10 stacks will be gone. So you always want to maintain these 10 stacks. Even if you're going about your normal rotation, you want to stand inside of the ring and attack. Have a good source of, like a good sense for light attack weaving, so you can always keep these 10 stacks up. Because if you lose them, you will lose out on 520 spell damage, which is a lot, and you definitely don't want to lose that. Now for the rotation, start out with Trap on the front bar, then you swap bars, and what you do is Mystic Orb, Light Attack Solar Barrage, Light Attack Wall, swap. On your front bar, you'll go with Light Attack Spear, then 3 jabs, with light attacks in between them, and then Barbed Trap swap. So Orb, Barrage, Wall, spear, 3 jabs, and trap, swap. Orb, barrage, wall, spear, 3 jabs, swap. And as you can see now on the front bar, sometimes our character is turning sort of like bluish invisible, and that is the mechanical acuity proc. So you want that to proc on your front bar, because that is where most of the damage is going on when we're using our spammables. Like this now, perfect timing. We get 3 spammables in. As you can see, we're sort of bluish glowing, and that is when we have the 100% crit chance from the mechanical acuity set, the mechanical vision as it's called. And you want that to proc on your front bar when you're doing the jabs, when everything else is running, when your beast trap is still up, when your solar barrage is still going, when the orb is still flowing, when the spear is still down, when the wall is still down, and when you start jabbing, because that's when you do most of the damage. That's why we only have it on the front bar. So it procs, hopefully, like this, just when you're doing your 3 jabs, and when everything else is running and you got the most DPS out of it. Okay, so much for that. That's how the build works. It's really fun. People have been sort of longing to play like a hybrid character with like daggers or swords and stuff for a long time. Now it's finally possible, and it is really fun to use. One thing I forgot to mention is if you can't be close ranged, or if you don't want to use daggers, you can use this exact same build with an Inferno Staff of Mechanical Acuity infused with a flame glyph on the front bar. So if you don't want to use the daggers, if you don't want to level up dual wield, you can use the exact same build with an Inferno Staff infused of Mechanical Acuity on the front bar with a flame damage glyph on it. Okay, champion points real quick. Green stuff is just quality of life things. You get more gold, your glyphs don't decay that fast. The slottables that I always go for is Treasure Hunter, just to get better quality items from treasure chests. Rationeer, so my food lasts longer. Liquid efficiency, so the potions I use have a chance to not even be consumed. And then Steed's Blessing for increased movement speed outside of combat, just to get from one boss to the next a little bit quicker. The blue tree, the slottables we're going for here are Deadly Aim, increased damage with single target attacks. Biting Aura, increased damage with area of effect attacks, because we have a lot of them. I left out Thaumaturge because I do not actually run any damage over time effects, and not any single target ones anyway. In favor of Backstabber for increased crit damage, again, 15% crit damage while flanking, so attacking an enemy from the side or behind. And then Fighting Finesse for another increased 10% crit damage, just in general. So these slottables work really well with the build, since we have 100% crit chance. We're a Khajiit, a Templar, we have Minor Force, we have these champion points, everything boosts our crit damage. So this is working very nicely with each other. You definitely want Eldritch Insight for increased max Magicka, and Precision for increased crit chance. You don't technically need that on this build, but since this is one of my own characters that I play a lot, sometimes I swap builds, that's why I have points in there anyway. What you do want though is Piercing for the Penetration, Flawless Ritual, and War Mage from this tree. And then all your DPS things are going to be maxed out. That's when you can start putting points into your mitigation. So Quick Recovery, your healing taken, Preparation reduces damage taken from non-player attacks, from martial attacks, or from magical attacks. So, yeah, it's a bit of a... It's your own decision, really. Most people I know go for everything that does damage first, because they want to get the most damage possible. But if your survival is a bit more important to you, and you might not be so experienced with roll dodging and interrupting things and healing yourself or putting a shield on, you can get a couple points in here as well, and then finish off the DPS stuff later on as well. So this is all possible, definitely. So if you're feeling like you're a bit too squishy, you can just get some here into Hardy, Elemental Aegis, and Preparation, and Quick Recovery to get a bit more damage resistance and recovery and health healing, and then finish off with, for example, this tree later. But that's your personal choice, really. So I just got this in here because I wanted to see how much damage I can do. For the red tree, we've got Rejuvenation, Ironclad, and Boundless Vitality for increased max health, increased armor, and increased Magicka health and stamina recovery. And then Siphoning spells, we restore 1500 Magicka whenever we kill an enemy. This is really good for sustain. Then we've got Hero's Vigor for more max health. After that, I went for Sprinter and Hasty to get faster movement speed while sprinting. Then for Tumbling, because I roll dodge quite a lot. Then into Mystic Tenacity, which will reduce the duration of status effects applied to us by 10% now, with 20 points into it. And after that, you can go for your block cost reduction on the increased damage you can block, or maybe the cost of bashing, if you tend to do that a lot, or the cost of breaking free. It's good to have a little bit into all of these, but the most important things to get are definitely Hero's Vigor and Siphoning spells, and Rejuvenation, Ironclad, and Boundless Vitality. So your slottables and your max health, and then everything else is just, well, just choose whichever is more important to you. If you'd rather be fast, rather roll dodge more, rather be able to block more, that's all just personal preference. Alright. One thing I forgot to mention is look at the AoE damage that build does. So just going on the rotation here, pretty much everything we do is AoE except for the Barb Trap. But the damage you're doing in like sort of in dungeons while clearing ads is really good. So there's a lot of like all these ads continuously take damage from everything, from our spear, from our jabs, from our solar barrage, from our wall, from our orb, everything really, from our ultimate even. Super cool. I really hope you enjoy this build. I really hope you enjoy playing Magicka Templar. They're a bit stronger now with this patch, which is really nice because it's one of my favorite classes to play on. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.